One family owns more American land than the entire state of Rhode Island. They control the juice you drink, the hotels you stay in, and they just bought 300,000 acres of farmland while you were scrolling through social media. Yet their name never appears in Forbes headlines. I'm talking about the Boswell family of California, and what they've built will blow your mind. In the next few minutes, I'll reveal three shocking facts: how they quietly became the biggest farmer in America, the brilliant way they control water in the driest state, and the surprising reason they're now the second largest landowner in the entire country. This family has been playing a different game than everyone else for over 100 years. And they're winning. Let me show you exactly how this happened. Picture California in 1920. The state is growing fast, but most of it is desert. Water is scarce. Farming seems impossible in many areas. Everyone says you can't build an empire in the dusty center of the state. One man disagreed. His name was J.G. Boswell, and he had a wild idea. He started buying land that nobody wanted, thousands of acres of dry, cracked earth in the Central Valley. People thought he was crazy. This land looked worthless. But Boswell saw something others didn't. He understood that whoever controlled water would control California's future. Today, his family company, J.G. Boswell Company, farms over 150,000 acres in California alone. That's bigger than the entire city of Chicago. They're the largest cotton producer in America and one of the biggest tomato growers on Earth. But here's the crazy part. Hardly anyone knows this company exists. They don't advertise. They don't do interviews. They operate massive farms that feed millions of people, yet they stay completely out of the spotlight. The Boswell family learned something important early on. Invisibility is power. While other wealthy families chased fame, the Boswells chased land and water rights. While others built flashy headquarters in cities, the Boswells built an agricultural empire in places most Americans have never heard of. And it worked. Over 4 generations, they've turned that worthless desert land into some of the most productive and valuable farmland in the world. They've accumulated wealth that rivals tech billionaires, all while staying so private that most Californians don't know they exist. The family still controls the company today. They make decisions together, keep everything private, and continue expanding in ways that would shock you. Now here's where things get really interesting. The Boswells don't just farm land. They've figured out how to engineer water itself, and that's made them unstoppable in California. Let me explain what this really means. California has a huge problem. The North has most of the water, but the South has most of the people and farmland. Moving water from north to south is one of the biggest challenges the state faces. The Boswells solved this problem for themselves decades ago. They didn't just buy land. They bought land with water rights attached. In California, water rights are sometimes more valuable than the land itself. These rights let you take water from rivers, streams, and underground sources. Here's where it gets incredible. The Boswell Company controls more water than some entire cities. They have rights to pump massive amounts of groundwater. They have contracts for surface water from major California water projects. They've essentially built a private water system that serves their farms. Think about how powerful this is. In California, water equals life. During droughts, small farmers go broke because they can't get enough water. Their crops die. They lose everything. But the Boswells? They keep farming. They keep producing. They keep making money. This isn't luck. This is strategy that took 100 years to build. But the water story gets even better. The Boswells don't just use water. They've learned to profit from it in ways most people never imagine. When they have extra water rights they're not using, they can sell them or lease them to other farmers or cities. When water is scarce and prices skyrocket, guess who benefits? Let me give you real numbers to show how massive this operation is. The Boswell Company grows about 60,000 acres of cotton every single year. To put that in perspective, imagine a cotton field so big, it would take you an hour to drive across. Now imagine 60 of those fields. That's what we're talking about. They also grow tomatoes on thousands of acres. When you buy tomato paste, tomato sauce, or ketchup at the store, there's a very good chance those tomatoes came from Boswell farms. They supply major food companies you know and trust. But here's something most people miss. The Boswells are smart enough to know that farming alone isn't enough. California is changing, cities are growing, water is becoming more valuable. So they've positioned themselves perfectly for the future. They own land in areas that everyone said would never be valuable. But now, as California keeps growing, that land is right in the path of expansion. What was worth $1,000 per acre when they bought it might now be worth $50,000 per acre or more. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. The Boswells didn't stop at California. They've quietly been buying up land across America, and they just pulled off one of the biggest land deals in modern history. In 2017, the Boswell Company did something that shocked the few people who were paying attention. They bought a ranch in Montana called N-Bar Ranch. This wasn't just any ranch. This was 60,500 acres of pristine land with water, forests, and minerals underneath. But that was just the beginning. They kept buying, and buying, and buying. Today, the Boswell family is the second largest private landowner in America. Only one family owns more land than them, and that's barely. We're talking about close to 2 million acres of land spread across multiple states. To help you understand this scale, if you tried to walk across all the Boswell land, it would take you months. If you tried to drive it, you'd need weeks. This isn't just a farm. This is a land empire bigger than some countries. But here's what makes this really fascinating. They're not just collecting land like baseball cards. Every piece of land they buy fits into a larger strategy. In California, they focus on farmland with water rights.
Refreshing!
Lucky Barn. Just one sip.
In Montana and other western states, they buy ranches with timber, minerals, and recreation value. In the Midwest, they're looking at grain-producing regions. Each acquisition makes their whole empire more valuable and more protected. Let me break down why this matters. Most farmers are stuck in one region. If there's a drought in California, California farmers suffer. If there's flooding in Iowa, Iowa farmers lose money. But the Boswells are spread across the country. When one region struggles, another region thrives. They've built a system that's almost impossible to break. And they're not just buying land randomly. They study climate patterns, water availability, and long-term trends. They're buying land they think will be more valuable in 50 years, not just today. Here's a specific example that shows their thinking. While everyone was panicking about water shortages in California, the Boswells were quietly buying land in Oregon and Montana, states with abundant water and room to grow. They saw the future and positioned themselves ahead of time. But the brilliance doesn't stop there. The Boswells have also diversified beyond farming. They own cotton gins that process cotton for other farmers. They have partnerships with major food companies. They've invested in agricultural technology and research. They even got into the business of selling seeds and agricultural products to other farmers. Think about this. They compete with farmers by growing crops, but they also make money by selling supplies to those same farmers. They win either way. The company also owns land that's leased out for oil and gas development. Some of their Montana property has mineral rights, which means they get paid when resources are extracted from beneath their land. They're literally making money from above the ground and below the ground at the same time. Now, let's talk about something that really shows how they think differently. Most megafarms are owned by corporations with shareholders demanding quick profits. The Boswells are still family-owned. This means they can make decisions that won't pay off for 20 or 30 years. They can plant orchards that won't produce for a decade. They can improve land slowly over time. They can hold on to property through bad years because they're not worried about quarterly earnings reports. This long-term thinking has compounded their advantages over generations. One agricultural expert I found said something that stuck with me. The Boswells are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. They're thinking generations ahead. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. The Boswells have figured out the ultimate secret. They're not really in the farming business anymore. They're in the resource control business. And that changes everything. Let me explain what this means. When you think of a farm, you probably picture someone growing crops to sell. That's how normal farms work. But that's not how the Boswell empire works anymore. The Boswells control three things that will only become more valuable over time: land, water, and food production capacity. These aren't just business assets. These are survival resources. And as the world's population grows and climate changes, these resources become irreplaceable. Think about this for a second. You can make more smartphones, you can build more cars, you can create more social media apps, but you can't make more land. You can't create more fresh water. And you can't easily replace productive farmland once it's gone. The Boswells understood this decades before anyone else. While tech billionaires were getting rich on apps and websites, the Boswells were quietly accumulating the physical resources that everyone needs to survive. Here's where this gets really mind-blowing. As America's population grows, we need more food. As cities expand, we lose farmland. As water becomes scarce, water rights become priceless. The Boswells own huge amounts of all three. They've essentially cornered a market that most people don't even realize is a market. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Right now, there's a massive trend of investors buying farmland. Billionaires and investment funds are scrambling to buy agricultural property. Why? Because they finally figured out what the Boswells knew 100 years ago. Land is the ultimate asset. But here's the problem for these new investors. The best land is already taken. The Boswells own it. The land with good soil, reliable water, and perfect climate is already locked up. These new buyers are getting what's left over, and they're paying premium prices for it. The Boswells bought most of their land when it was cheap. Some of their California property was purchased at 1940s prices. That same land is now worth hundreds of times more. This isn't just a good investment. This is generational wealth creation on a scale that's hard to comprehend. But there's another layer to this that's even more impressive. The Boswells don't just own land. They own the infrastructure that makes the land valuable. They own the water delivery systems. They own processing facilities. They own storage and transportation networks. This means they're not dependent on anyone else. A typical farmer has to rely on others for water, for processing, for transportation. The Boswells do it all themselves. This vertical integration makes them incredibly powerful and profitable. Now here's something that really demonstrates their long-term thinking. While other companies are focused on this quarter's profits, the Boswells are making investments that won't pay off for decades. They're improving soil quality. They're building water storage that will last 100 years. They're planting trees that won't mature in their lifetime. Why? Because they know their great-grandchildren will own this company. They're not building something to sell. They're building something to last forever. And here's perhaps the most surprising part. Despite being one of the most successful agricultural operations in history, the Boswells rarely appear in business magazines. They don't give TED Talks. They don't write books about their success. They just keep quietly buying land and growing their empire. This invisibility is intentional and strategic. When you're this successful, staying out of the spotlight means avoiding scrutiny. It means people aren't studying your moves. It means you can make acquisitions without competition bidding up prices. The Boswells have mastered something that very few wealthy families achieve. They've built enormous wealth and power while remaining almost completely unknown to the general public. So what does all this mean for us today? The Boswell story reveals something important about how wealth really works in America. While we're all watching tech billionaires and celebrity entrepreneurs, there's a whole class of ultra-wealthy families operating completely under the radar. These families aren't interested in fame. They're interested in control. And they're playing a completely different game than what we see in the headlines. Here's why this matters to you personally. The concentration of land ownership affects food prices, water access, and even where cities can grow. When a small number of families control massive amounts of resources, it shapes society in ways most people never notice. Think about what happens when farmland gets concentrated in fewer hands. Small family farms struggle to compete. Young people who want to farm can't afford to buy land. Rural communities change as big operations replace diverse small farms. But before you think this is all negative, there's another side to consider. Large operations like the Boswells can invest in technology and efficiency in ways small farms can't. They can weather bad years without going bankrupt. They can adopt sustainable practices that require upfront investment. The Boswell Company has actually been a leader in water conservation technology. They've pioneered drip irrigation systems that use water more efficiently. They've invested in soil health research. They've developed farming techniques that other farmers now copy. So the story isn't simple. It's not just big bad corporation versus good small farmers. It's more complex than that. But here's something that should concern everyone. As more farmland gets concentrated in fewer hands, our food system becomes less resilient. If something goes wrong with a few mega farms, it affects the whole country's food supply. The Boswells are just one example of a larger trend. Across America, farmland is being consolidated. Investment funds are buying up property. Foreign entities are purchasing agricultural land. The landscape of who owns America is changing dramatically. Now, let's talk about water, because this is where things get really serious for the future. The Boswells' control of water rights in California demonstrates a coming challenge for the entire American West. Water rights in the West were established over 100 years ago, often through laws that don't make sense today. Some entities have rights to take huge amounts of water, while others have none. As water becomes scarcer due to increasing demand and climate shifts, these old rights become extremely valuable and extremely contentious. The Boswells positioned themselves perfectly for this future. They secured water rights when they were cheap and available. Now those rights are worth a fortune and give them enormous leverage. Here's a specific example of why this matters. During California's recent drought years, some communities faced severe water restrictions. Residents couldn't water their lawns. They had to take shorter showers, but the Boswell's farms kept irrigating because they had the water rights. This created tension between agricultural water use and urban needs. I'm not saying the Boswells are the villains here. They're just following the rules and using the rights they legally own. But it does highlight how decisions made a century ago still impact us today. Looking forward, the Boswell model will likely be copied by others. We're already seeing billionaires and investment funds buy farmland as a hedge against inflation and uncertainty. This trend will probably accelerate. What does this mean for food prices? Potentially higher prices as land becomes more expensive. What does it mean for farming culture? Possibly fewer independent farmers and more corporate agriculture. What does it mean for rural communities? Continued consolidation and change. But there are also positive possibilities. Technology is making farming more efficient. Vertical farming and urban agriculture might reduce dependence on traditional farmland. New water technologies could make water scarcity less of a problem. The Boswell story also teaches us something about building lasting wealth. They focused on real, physical assets that have intrinsic value. They thought in generations, not quarters. They stayed private and avoided the pressure to make short-term decisions for public shareholders. These principles apply beyond farming. Whether you're building a business or planning your finances, the idea of accumulating valuable assets and thinking long-term is timeless wisdom. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. Here's the twist that brings everything full circle. The Boswells are now facing their biggest challenge ever, and it's not coming from where you'd expect. For over 100 years, the family stayed united. They worked together. They shared the same vision. But now, in the fourth and fifth generations, there are more family members than ever before. Some want to keep expanding, others want to cash out, some want to modernize, others want to stick with tradition. This is the classic problem of multi-generational family businesses. The more generations pass, the harder it is to keep everyone aligned. And here's what makes this really interesting. If the Boswell family ever decides to sell their land empire, it would be one of the biggest asset sales in American history. We're talking about potentially $10 billion or more in land value. Who would buy it? Probably a mix of investment funds, other agricultural companies, and maybe even foreign buyers. And that raises big questions about America's future food supply and land ownership. But there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. The family might decide to take the company public, selling shares on the stock market while maintaining control. This would let some family members cash out while keeping the empire together. If that happened, Americans could actually invest in this empire they never knew existed. You could own a tiny piece of the Boswell legacy. That would be a wild twist. The bigger lesson here goes beyond one family. The Boswell story shows us that real power in America doesn't always come with fame. Some of the most influential families and companies operate completely out of the public eye. While we're all distracted by social media drama and celebrity news, decisions are being made about land, water, and resources that will shape America for generations. Most of us have no idea it's happening. Remember at the beginning when I said one family owns more land than Rhode Island? That wasn't exaggeration. The Boswells control an area bigger than many states. They influence what food gets grown, where water flows, and how agriculture operates across multiple states. And until now, you'd probably never heard of them. That's the real shock. Something this big, this important, this valuable has been hiding in plain sight. The Boswells built an empire by staying invisible. They accumulated enormous power by avoiding attention. They became one of America's wealthiest families while remaining one of America's best-kept secrets. So next time you eat California-grown tomatoes or wear cotton clothes, remember, there's a good chance the Boswell family had something to do with it. They're in your life every single day. You just never knew their name. The question isn't whether families like the Boswells will continue accumulating land and resources. They will. The question is whether the rest of us will start paying attention to who owns America and what that means for our future. Because while we're busy watching tech billionaires launch rockets and buy social media companies, families like the Boswells are quietly buying the land beneath our feet and controlling the resources we need to survive. That's real power. And it's been there all along, hiding where most people never think to look.